MoBBallet Dance presents Dance Behind the Screen, process production and social media. Hey knowers, welcome to our podcast. We are MoBBallet Dance, a social media-based company. We strive to say no to the box. We connect interdisciplinary art, technology, and artists to re-envision the process of art making and sharing.
Welcome back to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. I'm your co-host, Azaria, and today I interviewed Teresa Ruth Howard. Teresa is a writer, a dancer, an activist. She has this extensive career that we got to dig into a little bit of each one of those topics. She danced for Dance Theater of Harlem. She teaches at the Ailey School. She's also a writer for Dance Magazine, among many other magazines. You might remember one of her articles is Instagram Changing the Dance World's Value System. We dig a little bit into that article. In this episode, we also talk about hard conversations such as race and equity and how we can all come together and move forward as a dance community. I think this is a really important episode, and I hope you enjoy the show. So to get started, there are so many things that you're doing. I wanted to know how you describe yourself as an artist, because we could talk about so many of the things that you've done.
That's a hard question to ask, because as you said, I there's so many different versions of myself. As a dance artist, wow, that was so long ago. I think that I would describe myself as curious and always striving to grow and deepen my artistry. And I think that carries over into the way that I functioned as a dance educator, and it makes sense that it also carries over into the journalist part of myself, and this new iteration, or the newest iteration of myself as a diversity strategist and advocate for diversity in ballet and the arts.
That is amazing. So to start off, can we maybe go back to your time dancing with Dance Theater of Harlem, and then maybe we can work our way chronologically to your activist work?
Sure, absolutely. So what would you like to know about my time at Dance Theater of Harlem specifically?
So what was your experience there? What drew you to Dance Theater of Harlem? Why did you choose this company?
It's really interesting because my first point of reference with Dance Theater of Harlem was when I was 8 years old. Dance Theater of Harlem was coming through. I'm from Philadelphia originally. And they were coming through. They were touring a show called Doing It. And it was a quintessential Arthur Mitchell concept that was designed to draw the Black community into the ballet. And it had a gospel choir. I think it might have had some, theatrical elements, but then there was also ballet, right? So he was like camouflaging the ballet in...
Right.
Right.
Very clever.
But he was very brilliant that way. And so it was in two acts. And at the top of the second act, they would have a group of 12 ballet children come out and do like a ballet bar. And this was also brilliant because in each city, they had an audition for local children to play those parts. And so my father drugged me to the audition. There were like 200 kids there, and I was chosen to be a part of that show. And subsequently, I got to see Dance Theater of Harlem for the first time, but also very close up, like be backstage, see the women putting on their makeup and douglas backstage. I think I was traumatized by the men's behinds. They were. Wait, when you're like 8 years old, you are booty level, eye level, and so it was like But I was struck by the fact that this, I'd always felt like a unicorn. Training
In what way? Yeah.
Training at Pennsylvania Ballet, I think I was one of probably 3 Black students there, one of whom was Andrea Long, who ended up dancing for New York City Ballet and then Dance Theater of Harlem later. Um, but to see a whole company of people who looked like me, who liked doing what I liked doing, and were doing it at that high level, was transformative for me. And so from that point on, I never wanted to dance for another company, but for Dance Theater of Harlem. And so that's what drew me in.
That's very interesting. Could I pause you?
Absolutely.
I really think this concept of feeling like a unicorn is really important. And I think there are many dancers today who still need to maybe hear this story. Could you maybe give a little advice or tell other ways that maybe other students or young girls who are feeling like unicorns, how to overcome that feeling?
Absolutely. And this is funny because now our conversation won't be like in the beginning, you said, let's do a chronological sort of like story line. And this is sort of how my life is that it wasn't a straight line.
Right.
So we'll jump to sort of what I'm doing with Memoirs of Blacks in Ballet, MoBBallet.
Perfect.
And the idea that that's one of our hashtags, right? Is hashtag, we are not unicorns, as well as hashtag we are the village, because it takes a village. So we are the village to raise dance artists. So to that, I'd say that part of what I'm striving to do with MoBBallet is to create a visible and tangible community for Black ballet artists. And when I say artists, I mean not just students, but for dance educators, studio owners, choreographers, a place where we have that feels like Dance Theater of Harlem felt to me, a home where we can discuss, and commiserate on the art that we love, the art form that we love. So advice-wise, I would say, generally we are one of a few. Nowadays, it's less common to be the only one in your dance class or dance company, although it can still happen.
Yes, it does.
Right. But the thing that's really amazing is that oftentimes when there are only 2 or 3, those Black students or dancers won't engage with each other. A lot of times they'll avoid one another because there's this sense of competition, right?
Right. Meeting the quota.
In the company, they're white people. They don't feel in direct competition with
each other.
Right. Whereas, it's the Black girls. Like if, the Black girls are in competition with each other.
Yeah, I definitely understand that.
They're ignoring all the other white girls around them that they're in competition with. And there's historical roots in that, of course. But I really, my advice is to reach out and create those connections in the spaces that you are. And even if it's not a peer, meaning somebody who's in your direct level, if you're training, then if you see that little brown boy or girl in the hallway, then reach out to them. Don't do the obligatory, like, Black people nod, like, I see you. Really reach out, learn their names, and create community, right? That's part of our responsibility, so that we are seeing each other, we are supporting one another, so that we aren't in this solitary, isolated sort of situation. That would be like one of the big things that I say that in your space you can actually do.
Thank you for that. And like you said, I always seem to try to do things in a linear fashion, but we know the creative process will often debunk that. So let's keep on with this MoBBallet. Well, you were the founder. You've kind of spoken to what is important to creating this. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more of the process of making it and the digital platform of, especially the timeline? I really enjoyed the timeline. Will you tell us some about those features and about the company?
Absolutely. I think it was in April 2015, I wrote an article that sort of took to task the narrative it's important that I stress the narrative of Misty Copeland being the one and the only.
Right.
And it's about the concept that in the support of actually the world to lift her up, there was an erasure of the actual history and the depth, right? And the wealth of the contributions of other Black ballet artists. That if you're familiar with our timeline, it goes back to like 1846, right? In America. So in the comments of that article, I asked for people to, if they were a Black ballerina or Black ballet dancer or a new one, put their names in the comments so that we can make the invisible visible. And the outpouring was so extensive. I mean, people were having full-on conversations, dropping links. I was like, this has got to go somewhere. It has to live somewhere. And subsequently it became the roll call. And I think we're now to 504 names.
Awesome.
And so in my head, I had always thought about this concept, right? Of, vaguely, but there was a need for it. There's an absence of certain types of conversations, especially with when Dancing of Harlem shut down the company and they were gone. I felt like, wow, what's happening? Like, where are we? So MoBBallet was sort of created in the spirit of how do we have this not happen again, right? So part of that article spoke about how, journalists can be very, very lazy in their research and only, Google 2 or 3 articles back and consider research, right? And so how do I create a platform where for lazy journalists, for a better, example, where you could actually go somewhere and see all that information, right? You don't have to scrounge around for it. How do I put all of our not all of our history, well, try to, cultivate as much of it in one place for students and educators and dance enthusiasts so that we can not only just see that there is this long and deep history, but learn about it. And so, there's the roll call, which is like a Black Wikipedia or endeavor, Black Wikipedia of dance artists. We have the timeline because that's important to see for a number of reasons. It's important to see everything that kind of happened, but on our timeline, if you actually click into it, you'll see that we have other happenings in that year for that data point. And I wanted to juxtapose whatever that ballet data point was against what was happening in the world so that people can understand either how amazing it was, right? Or how incredible that it had, that this is only where we are. Like we need to understand why.
The context.
The lack of diversity exists. And when you see what some of our early pioneers were up against, the idea that they existed at all.
Exactly. Yes.
It's like you go like, whoa, okay. It's not about how few. It's amazing that there even were.
Yes, this tool is so important, and I'm planning on having my class do some digging through this because I'm teaching dance history from the Africanist perspective this semester. And I was so excited to be doing research on you because when I found this timeline, it was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I want them to know about histories that aren't always told, but not even only that, you are already helping to provide some of that context that we were talking about, world events. And I think that's a concept, student or not student, that it's hard for a lot of us to not only take a raw fact, but also to pair it with this context of what's going on and to have like this broader idea and image.
That makes me so happy that you're using it. No, really. I mean, like, I'm in my little cave doing my thing, and you never know if people are actually noticing or whether it's useful or not. So it really makes me happy that it is a tool that educators can use because that's the point, right? And so And I always meant for MoBBallet to be collaborative
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not a historian, right? I'm not technically a scholar. Um, I'm just out here doing it, right?
Well,
So
yeah, I was like, you are in my eyes. Exactly. I feel like if you're out there doing it, then I mean, what more
I
can we ask for?
no, I really respect people who, pay the money, put in the time and the effort to get letters and things behind their name and get pieces of
Yeah.
papers that mean something. We all
Yes,
know that that's
yes,
all
yes, yes,
relative,
yes.
but so I respectfully say, technically I'm not a scholar. I do scholarly work, I suppose.
Mm,
But if it can be helpful in any way, and if you find, if someone writes a really interesting paper or finds new data, please send it my way because I will incorporate that. It really is um, was meant to be a collaborative effort by the community,
mm,
because that's how that's how the African American Museum at the Smithsonian was created, right? In a
right.
collaborative effort of people just sending in artifacts. And
Mm,
and that's sort of the what I'm trying to do digitally.
yes. Yes. We are all about the digital space. So there is much accolade from our side about having this accessible, not having to always go to a physical place, which it's very important. And I love a museum, but I think in this digital age and the way that people are operating now, having this online resource is imperative, in my opinion, at
It's just
least.
the reality of where we are.
Yes.
No judgment on either side, but
Hmm.
they're different, but both important.
Yes. And one more plug while we're on this for all of our listeners. If you are a Black ballerina or a Black dancer, please go to our website and check out that roll call and go ahead and put your information in there so that we know that you exist.
You are listening to Knobbox Dance.
I'll just say one more thing about each
Uh-huh.
page. Really, in the way I conceived it is that is something for the individual artist. So anything you want to be on your page, if you send it to me, it can be on your page. Like that can be a calling card. In fact, if people are looking for dancers or people are looking for teachers who have been professional Black ballet dancers, they would be able to go to MoBBallet and get, if you have a website, we'll put the link up. If you have videos, we'll put the link up. That belongs to the artist.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So this would be a good transition time to your diversity strategies,
Yeah.
and how you've kind of forged another offshoot of your career in equity and training for companies. Will you kind of go into some detail about that for us?
Absolutely. So now this brings us back to, the origins of MoBBallet. So that article kind of went viral in the
Mm,
dance world. And so people started to ask me to come and speak about um, my perceptions of the lack of diversity and things like this. And the first person or the first organization that asked me to speak was Dance USA. At their conference, they
okay.
used the article as a breakout session. And one of the things I said to Amy Fitterer, who's the artistic executive director there, was that I didn't want to preach to the choir. So unless there was leadership there, I was not interested in
Hmm.
having a conversation. It was,
Hmm.
I mean, we all know, all the people in the room already know. So
Right, right.
that's the point. Where she said, I can't guarantee artistic directors because they generally don't come to the conference. I can get some executive directors there, and she did. Um,
Okay.
and the other thing I was very clear about, and this was the beginning of, you know, my concept of the diversity strategy, was that we were having, this is a circular conversation. We've been having it for years, but I thought the tone and the tenor of the conversation was the thing that was holding us back. And
Hmm.
generally what happens in conversations about diversity or the lack thereof is that the white people in the room come in automatically defensive, afraid of being called racist, and the Black people are full of their frustration. They oftentimes anger, and their pain. And it comes out and it is very emotional and powerful. And it launches at the white people, and the white people shut down and nothing gets done. Right?
Yeah. I mean, in the dance world, in the larger society at large,
in these spaces, right?
Yes.
So I said, okay, I want to change the way that we have this conversation, get it out of and oftentimes the people of color in the room are in the heart space, and the white people in the room are in the head space. And so those things don't align. And I wanted to get the white people into the heart space. And I wanted to evoke empathy into the conversation and make it not about numbers, and make it about the human experience of what it feels like to be a person of color in that space of whiteness. And it actually worked.
How? Tell us. What is the secret?
The secret was evoking my humanity and bringing in the stories and the experiences of being a Black person, what it feels like, right, to be a Black person in that space, right? It's inclusion is not just about being in the room. Inclusion is a feeling,
right? And
once you tap into people's humanity, their empathy, they see not. It's kind of like, what's the movie with Matthew McConaughey and Samuel L. Jackson, and he's telling the story of the little girl who was raped and murdered, and he asked the jury to close their eyes, and then he's like, imagine if this girl was white.
Right. I can't remember the name. I know what you're talking about.
Forget it, but, right?
we'll find it and we'll link it in the show notes.
But it's what would happen if this was your daughter or son experiencing this and feeling this. And here's how I know that it worked, because of some of the people in the room were the executive director of Pacific Northwest Ballet, Ellen Walker, Kathy Brown of New York City Ballet, and Greg Cameron of Joffrey Ballet. And they all waited to speak to me after. And Ellen said to me, I get this in terms of gender. When I walk into a room, I automatically notice how many women are in the room. Right. I said, exactly. That's your lens of being a woman. Right. Makes you see that way. I said, I, as a Black woman, walk into the room, I notice how many women are in the room, how many people of color are in the room. And it's just changing your lens. And so now I can count Ellen Walker amongst not only my allies, but one of my friends. And she opened herself up to the possibility. The other thing is I started the talk by saying, we're not here to blame and shame. We're here to listen. Right. And the organic thing is to either deflect things or to suppress things. And I invited us as a group to enter into a covenant that we were just going to be with one another, and we were going to resolve this. This is going to be uncomfortable, but we were going to be okay with the uncomfortability, and that it was a learning space, and that you may say something wrong, but instead of being attacked, we're going to work to explain why.
So is this one of your concrete strategies that you start every time off with? Because I understand and I think a lot of artists, especially filmmakers, are really pushing this see our humanity. And I understand that, but how do we do that concrete? Do we start by having this preliminary conversation of here are the guidelines to this conversation? Because I feel like seeing the humanity in someone should be automatic, but we know that it's not.
Right.
So how are we doing that? So
sorry to cut you off.
No.
In facilitation, setting guidelines and training, setting guidelines of communication, that's a norm, right? Always a great idea. People have been using, make this a safe space, a brave space. And I've even expanded that to say, yeah, we can say we're going to make this a safe space, but that doesn't mean it's a safe space. Like
Exactly. That's how I feel about the word.
We are responsible for that, right?
Right. Okay.
As human beings, like you can say that, but if you're not in the beingness of openness and acceptance, right, then it's not going to happen. We're going to be triggered, but we all have to address the fact or agree that even through our being triggered, that we're going to work really hard to show up in the room. And that could be like, I'm really triggered right now, as opposed to acting out, right? From that triggered space. And so for me, I think that in my experience, what I try to do is be it. Like I have to be the example and create the vibration and the feeling of acceptance and being safe and listening. And I definitely go in, right? That's part of what I do, but I have to do it in a way that is supportive, that is loving. It's sort of like the way that I guess I come to this from teaching, right?
Okay.
Is you have to lovingly correct. You can, compliment people when it's good, but you have to be, look, that's a hot mess when it's bad. You have to cultivate a trust in the room. And I take that very seriously. Like it is my job, if I'm at the front of the room as a facilitator, to shepherd this particular flock and protect them in this process.
Could you maybe give one piece of advice for those who are coming from the head space and one piece of advice for those who are coming from the heart space of how they can come to the middle to have a productive conversation?
Okay.
Is there any like preliminary talks that you kind of help to get these people from these to middle ground? Is there something that you say? Or is there some advice you could give to help people to be open?
It's very fun. I mean, probably depending on the day, this answer could change. But we just finished the third convening of something called the Equity Project, which has brought together 21 ballet companies in North America to increase the presence of Blacks in ballet. It's a learning cohort. Okay. And at our last convening, we were all very reflective. One of the things that kind of rose up as a theme were stories, like people telling their stories. A thing that helped, and this is a convening, I should say, it was primarily designed for artistic and executive directors of ballet companies.
Okay.
So the leaders, right? Leadership.
Right.
And the thing that seemed to be the theme was that they heard stories, whether they were historical stories, whether there were stories of Black ballet dancers and their experiences, whether it was stories of artistic directors and things that they had confronted over this 3-year period as they're in this work, right? And as their lens is changing. Which brings me back to the humanity part of it, right? It's when
exactly.
Connect on a human level in an emotional way, we are more likely to identify, right? And it makes sense. It anchors in a certain place.
All right.
And this work tends to pool in this area of, like data and numbers, like how many Black people, like how to get all like ticking boxes.
Right.
And over the 3 years, we've been able to move people from the idea that this is a box ticking. I mean, trust me, people are still ticking boxes. And boxes need to be ticked, right?
Yeah.
The way you tick
There's a place.
It's also
not the whole.
The way you actually go about ticking the box, right?
Yes.
Is it mindful? Is it thoughtful? Who have you engaged? It's about building relationships is key. You know, I speak a lot. My new thing is like, communities. Communities always comes up. Like the community that we serve as an organization already, like the community that we're reaching out to. There's this, and I'm like, who are these people?
Right.
Like, we're using community as this monolith, as if we know there's diversity within the communities that we are looking to fold in. There's even diversity, like in the community that we're serving currently. And I think that there's a lot of assuming that goes on about who we're talking about, who we're dealing with, who's not included, who is, what their experiences are. And so I think the advice would be really to engage on a human, personal level and create relationships, and that connection, because that's the best resource for information and feedback that we have,
Right.
as individuals and as organizations. Oh, the other thing I would say is, I always say organizations are people, not constructs. And I think that we forget that. You hear people go, our organization, we, as in the organizational we. And it's like, well, historically, we have never, well, you can change that. You're actually not in control of that.
Right. It's the tradition excuse.
Right. And so you go ahead, traditions were made by people.
Right, exactly.
They don't grow up like trees independently. Like, that's us. So, yeah. So it's I think changing the perspective of the work and the starting place of the work.
Don't forget to say no to the box.
I really want to get in, maybe shift a little bit and talk about one of your articles, is Instagram changing the world's value system? So we are a digital-based dance company, and so we're a little bit obsessed about how social media and dance are interacting, and my other team co-host would be upset if I didn't get to this one. So I think everyone has read this article. If you don't remember, we'll also tag it in the show notes. But I remember the first time I read it, and I hadn't connected you as an author yet, but I was just like, yes. Like, I remember sharing it on Facebook when it came out. Can you talk about how we are in the gram, you call it, obsessed with this hyper flexibility and mobility and Gumby foot and all of these things that I think dance educators really recognize. But like you said, on the other side, so many people are obsessed with it or craving it. How do we go about this new negotiation of the space that is interested in the extremes, but is maybe not supporting actual dance artists? Yeah.
It's so funny. This article blew up. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, when I write things now, I'm like, what's the yes factor?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm not bringing it that way, then I'm like, does this article even need to exist? No. Yeah, it's really I wrote it because I myself, Instagram, the algorithm you're not in control, right? Of what you are in a way, but you're not. Like, you're being fed a diet that you don't think you have control over. Right? Like, you think you have to look at that. Well, you cannot. And I realized that my value system, I had to check it. Like, oh, if I am engaging in this, then I am supporting that. And I was concerned about the kids because I see their feeds and I'm like, oh, we're all aspiring to this. This is problematic. Like, I have a problem with everybody being half naked. Like, everybody's naked in the street, risking their lives to get a shot for Instagram. Like, And if you are a professional artist and you're half naked all the time, then that 12-year-old is really going to think that she needs to be out in a leotard in the middle of the street. And that's problematic. And then there's no art in that, right? So it's a value system thing. And um, so like I said in the article, I suggest that if you're a teacher, you should not, if you are like, that's a mess, then you shouldn't be taking that in.
Right.
You really shouldn't be taking it in. And we have to sort of redirect to what we think is beautiful and valuable. We were contradictory as adults, right?
Right.
That we have to go like, no. This is so funny. The other day I was talking to a friend of mine and I was mentioning, we were talking about YAGP and competitions. And I said, it's really funny that a couple of years ago, the director of the Royal Ballet School, Christopher Powney, wrote this beautiful article about about how competitions can be damaging and how the Royal Ballet School was not going to be going to certain competitions that year. And they were going to evaluate their presence at certain competitions because they have, 2-year-olds doing kitschy,
Right.
which is just inappropriate.
Right.
And it's really funny because that article did not get picked up by anybody. Because certain publications and websites, some of their biggest advertisers are competitions.
Right.
So we have a problem, an ethical problem.
Yeah.
That we have to begin to really evaluate. So if you're a school director or even an artistic director, because we've heard this too, you can't be fishing on Instagram and giving out scholarships. Like you can't be sliding into people's DMs talking about come and audition for us.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? It's
a new world. Yes, I understand and I agree with much of what you're saying.
There's not an answer to it.
There's not an answer because I do think that competition has its place, and I know that it brings a lot of people into dance, but we also know there's a lot of issues, especially when we try to transfer that to like concert dance, and the value systems are very different. And even this idea of nakedness, is it the fact that they're naked, or is it the fact that we are pushing body image messages behind it?
It's also the hypersexualization, right?
Okay.
Of female body specifically. There's another layer on it if you add women or men of color. You know what I mean? It's layered. I think that yes, competitions in one way are a great experience and create opportunity for kids, but we're also not talking about the idea that it's a huge business.
Right. Yes.
It's a huge business. And so in there, there's a level of that corrupts the idea of the art in a way.
Right. To make money.
Right. So something like the Prix de Lausanne, which has a completely different structure. It has an educational structure to it. Probably not without its faults, for sure. But at least it holds as its measure the art form. One of the things that I talk about a lot, which is irritating to a lot of people, is ballet has systematically gotten younger and younger, especially with kids who are moving away from home to train.
Right.
Like it used to be, you'd be 15, maybe 16, 15, 16, last 2 years of high school or something like that.
Right.
You move away from home to train. Now it's like you're an ice skater or you're a gymnast. At 13 years old, you're leaving your parents to go board so that you can train full time. And my question is, well, who is raising these children?
Right.
And I had to ask one director specifically, do you know how to raise Black children?
Ooh.
Oh, I said, well, yeah, because that's what, I mean, one, raising children, period, but two, Black children in this world,
Yes.
you need to know.
Yes.
You know
Yes.
how to raise Black boys. And if
Yes.
you don't, then when you take a Black child of 13 into a world where now it's myopic and their point of reference is all ballet driven from 13 to 18, they don't know how to exist in the world. They don't have that feedback. Your mother and your family teaches you how to navigate the world as a Black body in a Black body.
Right.
There are things that you're not going to understand.
Right. Yeah.
It's great to be like, oh, we're all the same and different, but that the reality is it's not. And so
right.
is the rules are different for us. And unless you know how to communicate that and teach that, I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective and a very true one that I have not thought about.
So I think about these things.
Right. Which I'm glad that you're doing that work.
Create, discuss, and advocate for art. No box dance.
I am planning the second iteration of the MoBBallet Symposium.
Yay! And where and when and how can we follow and stay connected and participate?
Well, you should definitely check our gram. But I think it's going to be in Boston Ballet will host, and probably the week of the 16th of August.
Of August,
yeah.
2020.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
I'm trying to lock everything down. It's big and I want to expand it and add some interesting things. But I think that this is one of the missing links in the diversity issue is I'm trying to create equity. Like, what does equity look like for Black ballet dancers and dancers of color, as we broaden it out. And I think that this is part of it, that mentoring piece, that community piece, and the personal advocacy is what I'm going for.
Yay. We'll definitely make sure that we list that information on your show notes, and I hope that I'll be able to make it out and participate as well.
Oh, that would be awesome.
So yeah, I would love to meet you in person. So as we wrap up, we have a portion called Flash 4, where we ask all of our guests to answer 4 questions in a flash.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am ready. Doo-doo.
Okay.
Flash 4.
If you had to recommend a resource to our audience, what would it be?
Self-promotion, MoBBallet.org.
Awesome. Number 2, what was the first dance you saw?
Oh, you know what? The first dance I saw was my sister's recital. She trained at Philadanco, and I was probably 3 years old.
Oh, yay.
That's what made me want to dance.
That's beautiful. Number 3, do you think social media has a positive influence on the dance world? Yes or no?
I think it depends on what you're watching. I always point towards the Royal Ballet's social media. I think it's really, really great and educational. So it depends on what you're watching. It's like television or streaming. It can make you really smart or really dumb.
And number 4, what is your favorite social media platform?
Oh, Lord Jesus. I don't really have one. I mean, I use Instagram. Like my Instagram is where I put my focus, but let's say Instagram.
Instagram. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Charissa. It was a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm very honored that you wanted to speak to me. And thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOW Box Dance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.